I want to begin a series of teachings entitled Samson, the Sunlight Deliverer. And message one is entitled A Personal Solution to a National Problem. And I want us to look at Judges chapter 13, beginning at verse 1, and we'll be reading through verse 5. It says, "And the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines 40 years. And there was a certain man of Zorah of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and bore not. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto the woman and said unto her, Behold, now you are barren and bearest not, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Now, therefore, beware, I pray you, and drink not wine nor strong drink, and eat not any unclean thing. For lo, you shall conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite unto God from the womb. And he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines." A personal solution to a national problem. The book of Judges is a continuation or a sequel from the book of Joshua. Joshua has now died, being 110 years old. The children of Israel have entered into the land of Canaan. They buried the bones of Joseph the patriarch. They have had some conquests as far as land seizure is concerned. But at the time of the death of Joshua, there is still much land occupied. It had already been decided during Moses' leadership how the land would be divided among the Israeli tribes, but all the land had yet to be conquered because of the Philistines. They were the arch nemesis of Israel, and they occupied much of the Canaanite coastline, and they did it through the 5 lords of the Philistines. And the lords are the ruling Philistine cities or states, which are Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gath, and Ekron. These rulers were left by the Lord in Israel's quest and occupation of the land to give them the resolve to follow through and conquer no matter what opposition they had to face. And since Israel had no primary leader like Moses or Joshua, the Lord raised up judges or those who would pronounce the oracle or the speakings or the sayings of God. And these were men and women who were well versed in the law of God. They had the ability to interpret or make decisions in moral, civil, and ceremonial matters among Israel whenever the people would inquire of the Lord for counsel. The judges were bridges. They were mediators between themselves and God. The judges were like priests or elders or chieftains among tribes that had superior skills in matters of warfare, law, and jurisprudence. They would often be chosen by hereditary succession. They were champions because they engaged in exploits over their enemies that often opposed the nation, and their quest was to preserve the welfare and the culture of Israel. They were tribal heroes chosen by the elders of the land that would be commemorated by their descendants. And many of these traditions and practices are still perpetuated today in many cultures and in many communities in the East. And because these judges ruled for hundreds of years until a monarchy or kingship was established, they really had no centralized government for the entirety of the nation, which meant that they lacked the sense of unity and remembrance of worship and commitment to monotheism, with Jehovah being the supreme God of the Hebrew people. There were repeated cycles throughout the book of Judges of apostasy from God, their self-inflicting punishment in the form of oppression from neighboring countries who were those who opposed Israel. And of course, they would cry out to God for relief. He would send them deliverers or leaders of armies who would redeem them and release them from oppression because they had a fading memory of the supernatural workings of Almighty God. Now let's look to verse 1. It says, "And the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hand of the Philistines." The Hebrew people were practicing wicked behavior that had built-in consequences of the stress, injury, misery, calamity upon themselves that was out of alignment with divine principles. They were contributors to their own unhappiness as a people, and they were intentional in doing what was right in their own eyes. And there are many nations today that were like Israel of yesterday. They create their own standards for morality and righteousness, and they expect to be exempt from the consequences of their own choices. They did what was correct, fitting, pleasing, straightforward in their own eyes, in their own perception, viewpoint, perspective, vantage point, mental landscaping. So the nation had their own standard of righteousness, so did the individual. But the standard wasn't divine, therefore it created a decline for the individual and for the nation. And I want you to understand, if the standard is not divine, your life will decline. Let me say that again. If the standard is not divine, your life will decline. And the spiritual landscape that the Lord had set up for their own individualistic and nationalistic success, it was known for God being Jehovah, the existing one, the Jewish national name for God. And as a result of their way of life that led to their own oppression, this means that there was no liberation with evil practices with total disregard for divine principles. Let me say that again. There is no liberation with evil practices with total disregard for divine practices, which meant that they gave themselves over to the hand of the Philistines. That the word hand means the direction, strength, and power of the Philistines. Now, the word Philistine is Pelishti in Hebrew, and it means immigrants. The land belonged to Israel because the Lord had promised it to Abraham. But these immigrants were Westerners who temporarily occupied this land that the Israelites were to possess by conquest. The Philistines originated from the Gaza Strip near Tel Aviv by the southeastern shore of the Mediterranean. And they oppressed the nation of Israel for 40 years, for an entire generation. Israel was in bondage to an inferior people in the sense of purpose and destiny. And we often abdicate ourselves of divine possessions, replacing it for human pleasure because of our deliberate and volitional refusal to pursue what we have been promised to possess. Now, look with me to verse 2. It says, "And there was a certain man of Zorah of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and bore not." God knows how to extract a man out of darkness and a dismal scenario of a nation. It was evident that the love that the Lord had for Israel, he had a plan for their deliverance before they were in bondage and while they were in bondage. The Lord is in the business of liberation for his people and never incarceration for his people. Zorah is a small town in Dan, and it means hornet, a place of hornets or wasps. And the Lord used wasps to drive out the Canaanites in Exodus 23 and 28. The Danites, it means judge, from the root word Dan, which is one of the sons of Jacob, the fifth son, and his mother was Bilhah, which was Rachel's handmaid. And so Manoah, his name means a place of rest. And his wife was barren. And her name, according to the ancient Hebrew tradition, was Hazaleelpani, and it means shade facing, or one who faces the shade. She and Manoah had no child, but she was not being withheld on purpose, but she was being withheld for purpose, and they had to continue to hope in God's mercy. Now, as a result, verse 3 says, and the angel of the Lord appeared unto the woman and said unto her, behold, now you are barren and bearest not, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Look at how the tide is beginning to change. The angel of the Lord, the divine messenger in the form of a man, a theophany or an appearance of Christ in the old dispensation, reminded her of her state, not to depress her, but to encourage her. It actually indicates in the Hebrew that Manoah was sterile, and therefore Hazaleelpani couldn't get pregnant. But when it says but, that conjunction, it cancels, it zeros, it nullifies, it voids, it obliterates this momentary fact and prepares to infiltrate this monumental truth. This barrenness may be now, but conception is going to be next. No matter what may be going on in your life now, physically, mentally, spiritually, financially, relationally, your barrenness may be now, but your conception is going to be next. It says, you shall conceive. It means with absolute certainty. Manoah's state of being sterile will be no more, and his virility will be at full capacity. And the angel told her, you will become pregnant and deliver a male child in this world in the midst of the nation's oppression. And I'm sure that these potential parents, they have no idea, no inkling of how a child's birth is actually preparation for the deliverance of a nation. Many times when nations are in bondage, God is reshaping the spiritual landscape behind the scenes by positioning parents to conceive and birth solutions to the problems that their nations are often facing. You know, answers always and without fail always come in the form of people. I believe that there are answers to some of the world's problems that have yet to be born. But they will be born on time, in time, every time, all the time, until the end of time, because these answers in the form of people have to arrive according to divine timing as the answer, so the problem can be resolved fully and completely. Right now, your hopes, your dreams, your goals, your aspirations may be barren, and you haven't brought forth anything yet, but at the right time, you will receive a word from the Lord through his divine messenger to state the obvious that you haven't produced anything, but it's about to change, because you are about to give birth to a solution that's going to change the trajectory of the nation that you've been called to serve. Only divine messages can change human statuses. Let me say that again. Only divine messages can change human statuses. All right, now let's wrap this up. Verses 4 and 5. It says, now therefore beware, I pray you, and drink not wine, nor strong drink, and eat not any unclean thing. For lo, you shall conceive and bear a son, no razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite unto God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines. The angel is telling Manoah and his wife, as you prepare to give birth to your vision, your consecration becomes paramount for you to nurture and protect what you're going to give birth to. Spiritual prenatal care is crucial for a successful delivery of destiny. Let me say it again. Spiritual prenatal care is crucial for a successful delivery of destiny. Hazelelpani had to have a healthy pregnancy by not drinking alcohol, because this baby boy could have no birth defects, because he needed to fulfill his divine purpose with no physical, no mental health issues. He needed to be fit to do the will of God. So her conception comes with divine warning. This is how imperative and how crucial this was. The angel said, beware, Shema in Hebrew, that this pregnancy should be hedged about, to keep watch, to be on guard, to be circumspect, like keeping a garden cultivated, eliminating weeds and bugs. There must be boundaries to this gestation period to keep safe and preserve. He said, I pray thee, I entreat, or I appeal to you, because this is a divine imperative. He said, eat no unclean thing. The diet had to be kosher based on the Levitical law, because Samson's health and his extraordinary strength will be a direct reflection of his mother's care for him while he was in the womb. His development out of the womb will be a result of his development in the womb. His diet was a precursor to his destiny. Think about that. You can extract the word diet out of destiny. Think about that. But his mother is to be the carrier, so she's assigned the task for his welfare so he can be effective in his warfare. Let me say that again. Hazelelpani, she's assigned to the task for his welfare so he can be effective in his warfare. And if you're not fed right, you can't fight right. If you're not fed right, you can't fight right. And she couldn't eat anything unclean, meaning she couldn't digest anything polluted, foul, or impure. When you're carrying destiny, you can't consume or fraternize with people, places, and things that will defile your destiny. You have to learn to protect it with your life so the purpose of God may be made manifest in the earth. Your destiny must be devoted to the God who provided it for you. And so the angel here in verse 5, he repeats the same statement as in verse 3, but with an additional instruction. He said, no razor shall come upon his head. His hair should not be cut, because his growth and extensions of that hair would be symbology, typology, dedicatory of his vow to the Lord that shouldn't be violated or severed by cutting the hair. Now, to move a little fast forward, his strength would not be in his hair, but his strength would be in his covenant with the Lord. Hannah made a vow that Samuel would be a Nazirite, but the Lord chose Samson to be a Nazirite from the womb. That's why his mother's care for him had to be in line with divine protocol. The angel said he would be a Nazirite. That word Nazirite means to be consecrated, devoted, and untrimmed as a prince. And of course, they grew their hair in locks. No alcohol, no grape products. They couldn't go near dead bodies or affiliate with burials of family members. And anytime these vows were broken, they would have to go through a very strict purification process. So we have Samuel, we have John the Baptist, we have Samson, who would be the highlighted Nazirites in scripture. But you read more about Nazirites in that vow in Numbers chapter 6. But their assignments were very unique. So it required a very unique consecration. In closing, The angel reveals the purpose of this consecration and this vow. It says, he shall begin the initiation, the starting point, the launching pad of Israel being rescued from the oppression of the Philistines. The birth of a deliverer is a personal solution to a national problem. Hazelelpani had to extend her mind beyond this birth being just for her and Manoah, but the Lord is preparing Samson in the womb to bring the nation out of bondage. Oftentimes, our personal crises, in our minds, it bears no relevance to a national crisis. We feel that the national crises often has a direct effect on our personal crises, but your solution is not just for correcting your problem alone, but it also helps in correcting the nation's problem. God solves problems through people that he has chosen. This family was chosen to solve a problem for the nation by relieving Manoah of his sterility and of Hazelelpani's barrenness. Since they yielded to helping the nation, God is seeing to it that they are helped. He said that this baby boy would liberate and give victory with ample space and make broad, to set free, to preserve, to aid and succor from the hand, from the strength of this nemesis, this Philistine confederacy that occupies the coastline of Gaza. They can now count their days because deliverance is on the way. Thank you so much for listening to this message, and we encourage you to follow us on all of our social media platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, as well as TikTok, Benny E. Calloway III. We bid you grace and peace.